Alright, Year 9s, you geniuses, we are carrying on today in trigonometry and we're going to extend our knowledge just a little bit further. In the previous sessions we have looked at finding an unknown side if we know one angle and another side in a right-angled triangle. Okay, we're dealing with right-angled triangles here. Now today we're going to use trigonometry to find an unknown angle when we have two sides of a right-angled triangle. So before we get going, it's a good idea just to refresh our memory about SOH CAH TOA. SOH CAH TOA. And the S stands for sine, which is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. And tan is equal to opposite over adjacent. Make sure your calculators are set to degrees, and you do that, again, just to refresh your memories, by pressing Shift Setup. So that's on the top line of your calculator. Shift is right at the left. Setup is next to the on button at the top. And you then go to number 3, which is degrees, and you should have a little D in the top of your LCD display there. Okay. Now let's take a look at this pink triangle here. Hopefully you can see that okay. We're going to label our sides. So I'm going to label first of all my hypotenuse. That's opposite my 90-degree angle. Then I look at my x. Oh, I can see that I have an opposite to my x here. And then that means that this 4 is an adjacent. So you can see that we are dealing with TOA. We've got an O and an A. Okay, and we want to find the x. So this is an unknown angle. So what I do here is I write tan x is equal to opposite, which is 8, over adjacent, which is 4. Now how do I get my x by itself? Well, this is what you do. You write x equals the inverse tan, so we use that funny little 1 symbol again, of 8 over 4. Now what's 8 divided by 4? That's 2. Okay, so I could write a 2 in here. Now how do we do this on the calculator? Okay, so listen very carefully. Okay, pay attention at this point. So you write on your calculator shift, so you're going to use the shift key, and then the tan key. And when you do that, your calculator should display the word tan minus 1 open bracket. Okay, and now all you need to do is put the 2 in, close the bracket, and you don't actually need to close the bracket, but you should get in the habit of it, because when we get to more complex things you'll need to do that. So 2, and what your display should read when you put that 2 in, so shift tan, put the 2 in, close the bracket, you should get x is equal to 63.4 degrees. Okay, let's try the next one. We identify our hypotenuse, always do that first. Then we look at what we've got here. We've got an opposite. So you see we've got hypotenuse and opposite. So this to me is going to be sine. So I start off by writing sine x, then I go equals, now it's O over H, now O is 12, H is 16, and to get the x by itself I'm going to go x equals to the inverse sine of 12 over 16. Now on the calculator, press shift and then sine, and what will appear is this. Okay, it'll give you that, and then you put in 12 over 16. So you go shift sine, which gives you inverse sine 12, use your fraction symbol there to go 12 over 16, pop the bracket in. Oh, now when you pop the bracket in, you're going to need to move the cursor so that it's not at the bottom, otherwise you'll just get a bracket around the 16 and you'll be in error. So pop it around the whole thing by moving the cursor to the right, and I'm getting x is equal to 48.6 degrees. Now we're moving on to this yellow one. I hope this actually comes up on the screen okay. Let's label our sides. We've got an h here, it's opposite the hypotenuse. And then we've got this here, which is opposite the x. Okay, so call that an O. So you can see once again we've got a sine. We've got opposite and hypotenuse. So I write sine x equals, now the opposite is 0.3 and the hypotenuse is 1.2. Whoops, that's a bit messy. 1.2. So to get the x by itself, I'm going inverse sine of 0.3 over 1.2. And now we're going to do the same thing again. We go shift sine, which will give us that sine -1, right, symbol, or inverse sine. Then we put 0.3, put it over the fraction 1.2 in your calculator. Move the cursor so that you can put in a bracket that goes around the whole thing. If you're having trouble with that, just see your neighbour. So just have a look now. Make sure you've got that big bracket around the whole thing, and you do that by using the cursor, the big round circle button at the top. Then you can move the arrow or the cursor, the flashing bit around to the appropriate point. Now when you put this in your calculator, you're going to get x is equal to 14.5. Now we always do degrees in 1 decimal point, okay, so that's why I'm just going to 1 decimal point there. Okay, let's try these ones down here. Get rid of that, don't want that there. Good night, goodbye. Okay, the first one here, we've got to label our sides again. So we've got a hypotenuse because it's opposite the 90-degree angle. But this 12 is actually not opposite this time, it's adjacent to the x. So you can see that we're dealing with CAH, adjacent over hypotenuse. So we're going to go cosine x equals adjacent, which is 12, over hypotenuse, which is 18. So next we're going to go x equals, and we want the inverse cosine of 12 over 18. Now let's just refresh our memories. How do we do this on the calculator? So you want to press shift cosine, and when you do, this will appear on your calculator. And then at that point you're going to put in 12 fraction 18, and then you move the cursor by pressing that round button 1 to the right so that you can then put a bracket on the end. It actually doesn't matter at this point, but like I say, when we go to more complex equations later on, you want to be able to learn to put the brackets in. Now, when we put that into our calculator, what does it give us? So let me try this. Inverse cosine 12 over 18. And this is giving me 48.2 degrees. Okay? Now let's move on to the next one. This time we've got a hypotenuse across here, opposite the 90-degree angle. And again, we've got an adjacent right next door to the unknown e. So we're going to use cosine again. It's CAH. So cosine e, sounds a bit weird, doesn't it, equals adjacent 0.2 over 0.6. Now to get the e by itself, we go e equals, and we do the inverse of cosine, so it's that funny one again, of 0.2 over 0.6. Now in your calculator, you press shift cosine to get the inverse cosine, then pop that into your calculator, the 0.2 over 0.6, and then when you've got that in, you press equals, and you're going to get e is equal to 70.5 degrees. Okay, the next one we've got along here, I'm going to label my sides. I've got a hypotenuse here, and you can see that we've got an opposite. The 15 is opposite the x, right? See, it's opposite. And this one is adjacent. So we're going to go tan x equals opposite, which is 15, over adjacent, which is 12. X therefore must be equal to the inverse tan, right? That's how we get the x by itself. We apply an inverse of tan to both sides, of 15 over 12. Now, how do we get the inverse tan on our calculator? We press Shift tan, and it comes up with the inverse with an open bracket. You just pop in 15 over 12. You can close the bracket by using the cursor, and then you press equals, and you should get x is equal to 51.3 degrees. Alright, now in the work that I'm giving you, there are a couple of these sort of ones where you've got some word problems. So let's have a look at these ones. And we've got to draw them. Now again, with number 16, the middle number, the middle letter is going to be your 90-degree angle. So I'll just draw it like that, ABC, right? Now I know BC is 4. I know AC is 7, so that's my hypotenuse. And I want to find angle A, right? That's what that means, angle A. So we'll call this X. Now let's label our sides. This is hypotenuse. And we also know the opposite. Oh, so this is sine. So we're going to, remember? So we go sine x equals opposite over O over h. So over 7. How do we get the x by itself? We apply an inverse sign to both sides. Now, that will be my next line of writing, and you should, when you write yours, you should write it like this. Now, how do I do this on the calculator? I press Shift, Sign, and that will come up with the inverse. Then I put 4 over 7. I can fiddle around and close the brackets. And then I will get, when I press equals, I will get x is equal to 34.8 degrees. Let's try number 17. DEF. Look, it looks remarkably similar to the other one. Remember, it's just a sketch. The middle letter is always going to be our 90-degree angle according to the question if you read the instructions. Okay, that are in your book. EF is 5, DF is 10, and we've got to find F. Okay, so you can see, we'll call this X. We've got, let's label the things that we've got. We've got a hypotenuse. We've got an adjacent. It's adjacent because it's next door to the X. So it's a ka. So it's cosine x equals adjacent, which is 5. Remember, AH, so A goes over the H. The H is 10. And therefore, x is equal to, what do we do now to get rid of that cosine? We apply an inverse cosine to both sides. So I should get that. Now, how do I do that on my calculator? I press inverse cosine, and that comes up, or shift cosine, and it comes up with the inverse of cosine. I put 5 over 10, fiddle around with a bracket, and I get equals 60 degrees. And that's it. Now, sometimes you're going to get some more complex ones. These are ones near the end of your set of work for the day. And these are like the previous examples that we did, because we can't start with this triangle here, this green triangle. If you look at it, you've only got one piece of information. It's a pretty messy triangle. Okay, so what we need to do in that case is we need to figure out what this side is here. So I'm going to call this y. And if we can find out y, then we'll have two pieces of information to find x. So let's look at this top triangle, and I'll just go over it in red. We've got this is our right angle, so that's our hypotenuse. Y is our opposite, and the 4 is our adjacent. So I hope you can see that we're using TOA for the red triangle. So TOA is tan, and we've got tan 40, because they've given us the angle this time, just like yesterday, equals opposite, which we don't know, that's y, over the adjacent, which we do know. Remember, tan is opposite over adjacent. Okay, now let's rearrange that. Y should be equal to tan 40 times 4, or 4 times tan 40. Remember, the order doesn't matter there when you're multiplying. What do we get? Tan 40, make sure you put a bracket at the end of it if you're timesing it, times 4. Otherwise you'll get the wrong answer. See, this is why I was trying to get you into that habit. Y is equal to 3.36. Now, we want to save this answer, the unrounded answer, into our calculators. So remember, we go Shift RCL, which will give you the store option, and then you choose A. And it will say something like this on your calculator. It will say ans A, which means whatever you had there is now stored to A. So that's what you want to do. Now we're going to work with the green triangle. So we've got a hypotenuse here, and that y that we just found out, you can see, is again opposite. So I'm going to call that opposite. So we've got OH, and that's SOH, right? SOH. Sine is equal to O over H. So we're going to go sine x, which we don't know, is equal to opposite, which is 3.36, whatever it is, over 10. X equals, we apply the inverse. And what I want you to do here is, instead of using the 3.36, when you get to this point, so you go Shift sign, and it comes up with that, put in your fraction sign, and then you want to put an A here, because you've stored it as A in your calculator. So you would use the alpha button, and then the A button, alpha A, right? And then on your calculator, it'll have that A, and then just put 10 at the bottom. And this should give you, when you press equals, should give you the correct answer of 19.6 degrees. Okay? But even if you get stuck, if you just put the 3.36 in, you will get the answer. Okay, so that's how we do those.